Welcome to the Bestiary, where every episode we examine another monster from the Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. Join us at Alignment May Vary on Twitch, or listen to our podcast, which comes out a week later, on alignmentmayvary.com. Ask and get your questions answered on our Facebook page, or by sending us an email to alignmentmayvary@gmail.com. Enjoy the show.
All right, so welcome to the Bestiary. We are Alignment May Vary, and today we are here to talk about Gelatinous Cubes. And let me go down the line to introduce everyone that is here. Let's see. Jonathan, say hello.
I'm on now. Hello.
Yes, hello. You are unmuted. Welcome. This is the voice of Jonathan, our DM, who loves to murder us with these wonderful monsters. Tyler.
Hello.
All right, and this is Kayvon. Kayvon, say hi.
Hey there, everybody.
And last but not least, our guest for this evening is Ben Fisher. Ben, we brought you on board to discuss Gelatinous Cubes. This was your creature to pick.
This is not the true crime podcast.
Oh, well, it is the true crime. It's who murdered the gelatinous cube.
Oh, okay.
True crime is actually a pretty good description of it, because you would pretty much just see a bunch of, leftover remains of an adventurer if you run into a gelatinous cube, because it is literally an ooze that fills an entire dungeon hall usually and moves slowly but surely towards you, ready to engulf you, suck you into its depths, and then digest you in an acidy death. It's about right? Did I miss anything?
Close enough.
Sounds about right, yeah.
All right. Sorry, I had to get that out there so people knew what we were talking about.
Yeah, gelatinous cube is not a very descriptive name for a creature.
No.
Yeah,
I would
it's
never have guessed without your description.
Cube. Oh my gosh.
Bad naming.
All right. So back to Ben. Ben, why did you bring the Gelatinous Cube to our table today?
For sort of the same reason that I picked the owlbear way back in the day, because it's just one of those staple D&D monsters that I feel like is very specific to D&D. And for some strange reason has sort of perpetually been a mainstay monster across every version from very beginnings all the way up now, I guess, to 5e. And I find that fascinating. I'm always curious as to why it's so enduring and how it's changed as a very specific D&D trope to find in a dungeon from beginning to end.
Ben, what was your first encounter with a gelatinous cube? Do you remember? Or do you have one that's memorable?
I mostly DM'd growing up. And so it was definitely one of those monsters that you just, as a DM, you just can't wait to put in a dungeon, especially if you have a bunch of players who are not used to, who've not experienced it before because they're new to Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games in general, because it's just such a weird, who the fuck came up with that idea? And it's just sort of fun to just, it's sort of like I forget what they're called, the stalactites that drop from the
piercers,
ceiling, or the piercers, or the mimic.
Yeah.
Why the hell is a treasure box eating? Just the weirdest monsters. And as a DM, it's just so exciting to put them in there. So I can't remember the first time I did, but I'm sure I've done it 100 times since then.
All right. Well, do you want to lead a discussion about this tonight, or do you have questions for us?
Sure. I definitely have questions. I didn't know if anybody had anything they wanted to start talking about right away, but I'll start with maybe an easy one. Is the name of the monsters? Let me back up actually and say one thing. When I did this before, and it was about owlbears, and my comment at the time was, look how the original owlbear, when I was playing them, was all muppified and cute, and it was kind of a fun monster, albeit dangerous. They looked pretty cool. And then you showed me what 5e owlbears looked like, which is very much like a Zack Snyder-fied version of that. So now it's like this grim, dark horror beast for some reason. Is there an equivalent? Like the gelatinous cubes, as I remember them, had a specific, it looked exactly like they're described. Are they drawn, or are they scarier looking at? Yeah, the picture is showing up right now. That
yeah,
goofy,
apparently now they come with sexy women, but
right.
They do come with, they can't devour them. They just carry them along.
Has it gone from just being like the cube that moves along the dungeons to like some giant tidal wave that murders cities at a time? Or is it still sort of how I remember the classic gelatinous cube before I get any questions?
It is one of the creatures I think that visually and mostly mechanically has changed the least of any Dungeons and Dragons creature. Well, and that's not that surprising, right? Because they're oozes. So, there's only so much you can do with ooze. It has it's sort of in the name. It's an amorphous shape. There's not much you can really change with an ooze.
Okay, so I do have a bunch of questions, some of which are specifically ooze related, but let's start with like some obvious ones, perhaps. So it's called the Gelatinous Cube, presumably because it moves on down the dungeon corridors. Is it always a cube? Like if it was outdoors, is it still a cube, or is it just a cube because it's wandering through halls? It really could be a tube or a triangle or whatever shape it happens to be moving through.
The geometric gelatinous.
Right.
The geometric.
Gelatinous blob.
I like the gelatinous geometric. That's what it should have been called.
There are a couple of fun ways to answer this. The short answer is yes, it is always a cube. But as both Kayvon and I found in our favorite Dragon Magazine article in, is it 124?
124, I believe. Yeah, 124.
In the
nerds.
Ecology of the Gelatinous Cube. It says that they're capable of pushing themselves through a space as small as 1 foot, and that they can merge. And when they do, they merge to form a sort of tube. They're just
a thick-bodied but square worm.
Yes, like a square worm of gelatin.
So it becomes a gelatinous rectangle,
yes,
or a gelatinous
cylinder.
Column.
No,
cylinder.
Toppled column.
I just have to know, like, do you think there's a scarier shape than a cube? Like, do you think the cube is not a particularly...
Well, I always thought it was weird that it stays like that and it just sits there and jiggles. And I'm like, okay, how does it move? Because it's a square. Like, does it actually like flop over on its sides as it rolls along the hall very awkwardly?
That's a great question. Answer that question first.
Yeah, Stalker mentioned, isn't a sphere more mobile? Why is it not a sphere shape? And I'm like, yeah, that would have been. Indiana Jones boulder.
This
like,
actually does have this has a Gary Gygax answer. There's normal answers and there's Gary Gygax answers, which it's basically saying God did it, but really God had a reason, and that was because when they first conceptualized Dungeons and Dragons, everything was on grid paper. It was all dungeon hallways were 5 by 5, 10 or 10 or 5 by 5. And it was always, everything was square. And so when he described the shape of this thing as literally just shoving down the hallways, it was a perfect cube. It wasn't until later in designs that really they start talking about dungeons as, there's of course no naturally just like it's a perfectly cubish hallway. These days players would freak out about that and think you had a trap there.
So I liked Morgan's question though. Does it crawl on like teeny little?
It's got little pseudopod tentacles that it'll pull itself along with.
Oh, shut up! That's terrifying.
That it also
so it
uses that's where it gets its attacks from.
Oh, because it reaches out and pulls you into itself.
Yeah. So when it's moving, it just kind of like has little tentacles that it's moving along on.
And so these same little tentacles drag it along the ground.
Yeah, I'd say it's similar to sort of a snake in the way it sort of slithers on the floor, not in its physical motion, but that its base stays on the ground and it just slides with its base flat.
Yeah, think of its pseudopods as lots of little feet. It can create as many of these as it wants, and they lift this thing and sort of just shuffle it along the floor. They actually there's some descriptions like if it inhabits a space that isn't necessarily a hallway. What you would see is picture yourself in like a rocky corridor. It would be coming down there, and these little pseudopods would be constantly probing every inch of this cavern corridor to try to suck up nutrients or find food in every crevice and crack in the floor and walls. So,
though it should also be noted that the cube is nearly translucent, so getting close enough to see the pseudopods is generally not recommended.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
Also, it's good to keep in mind that, like, even though people say this thing is slow, it has a 15 base speed, which is half as fast as like the average person in D&D. So while it's not chasing after you and catching up, it's definitely not just very slowly inching around. Like it moves.
Right. If you stop for a break or you're injured and you're moving real slow or you're sleeping, that's honest. It seems like it's more of an ambush predator than anything.
Yeah. Okay. So,
well, I think we had that happen to us, Tyler, didn't we? Didn't we have one of those fall to the ceiling?
You had a black pudding fall on you, which is.
I'm sorry, there were several slime creatures that fell on poor Karina's head over the course of that adventure. So.
In fact, there was one in a Pathfinder campaign where I had gone to check out a different route, and the rest of the party had gone a different way through this dungeon, and I had walked smack into a cube, and I was just like, well, I'm dying, guys. They're like, well, can you yell? I'm like, no, I'm in a cube. And they're like, well, I guess you should start working on a new character.
The only addendum I wanted to add to all that was in terms of base movement. A lot of DMs missed this. It actually went in its attack called Engulf. It lets it move up to its speed. So on a single turn, even though its base movement is 15 feet, it can actually move 30 and attack.
Which makes sense.
It's a little faster than people think it is.
Yeah.
Now, Kayvon, you mentioned, or I think you mentioned someone mentioned its base speed is 15, right? So is that also its top speed?
Yeah, I think that's its top speed, shy of double moving or something like that, which it sounds like John's saying it's allowed to do a double movement. But yeah.
Or an attack.
Yeah, for an attack. But effectively, 15.
But let's say it doesn't want to attack. Can it sprint, so to speak? Can it go 30 for its full double move?
It's allowed. It's allowed to sprint. It can take the dash action.
Okay, so and then to go on to something you were mentioning before about like feeling around for food, etc. How does it sense its prey? Is it vibration? Is it heat?
Both. Yeah, it's attracted to vibrations and warmth, and not repulsed. It avoids cold surfaces. So if you have like a cold spell or something like that, or frost on a surface, it'll try to work its way around it rather than going through it. It avoids cold. But if you, it listens to or senses it. Technically, I don't think it can actually hear, but it senses vibrations and warmth.
How far away? Like, what are we talking about?
I think 120 feet. They were saying somewhere around there.
That's been reduced in 5th edition to 60 feet. Yeah.
Yeah. So it started. That's one of the things that's been altered. It started off at like around 120, and they've sounds like they've gimped it a bit.
There's a lot of things they've sort of removed.
They got rid of the paralysis, which I thought was kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, that is a big change.
So remind me, it used to paralyze in its original iteration?
Yeah, if we jump back to the original Gelatinous Cube, the thing that made it so there were 2 things that made it incredibly deadly. 3, actually. One was it was nearly transparent, so you couldn't see it. So it was definitely a trap monster.
Yeah, that's super interesting because all the illustrations they give them distinct color.
Yeah, tints of green or blue or something.
Well, I also love the fact that all the illustrations, even from the early days, there's like a floating skeleton there. So
it's like you think you'd see that.
You gotta. Like it's only Rygar the Barbarian who like ran forward, ignoring the floating skeleton, thinking that's normal, and ended up in the middle of a gelatinous cube.
Well, I've always liked the one where it's like you see a sword hanging in the air surrounded by glitter, and you're like, oh, it's a magical sword. I reach for it. You are swallowed by a gelatinous cube.
Yeah. It's kind of got that oddity to it. But, the basic idea is that you don't really see anything. and then you're in it. And then when you touch it in the old days,
oh wait, so it's that clear? Is that you just would like walk into it like you would through a well washed window?
Yeah. Shy of what's in it that's not being digested, which we can get into more detail. Mostly metal things.
Like that. Think about how clear that would have to be. I mean, to have like no. Like, because it's deep, right? Like, how is the average width of a gelatinous cube?
10 by 10.
10 by, well, that's a very specific fucking animal. But okay, so it's 10 by 10, perfect cube. So, like, but to see straight clean through that is like, that's clear. That's pretty amazing, actually.
I mean, even thick glass you can figure out it's glass just from the glare of the sunlight.
Well, you're in a dungeon, so there's not.
Yeah, but if you're carrying a torch,
the torch light doesn't reflect.
Yeah, torch or dark vision, you should still be able to like, there's a weird shimmer. But I mean, if you're not looking for a weird shimmer, I can see how you would still walk into it.
That might be why they tint these things green and blues, maybe because it's sucking up all that algae on like the walls of the dungeon, and it's kind of filling itself with a little bit of a green. Because they're saying effectively you only see what it's eaten and like the little vacuoles inside of it.
Yeah. That would make sense.
You're also talking the creature's size has changed over time. Like in third edition gets the most specific with its size, where it says it's a 15 feet on each side and weighs about 50,000 pounds. So this is a 50,000 50.
Oh, they made it much larger because every other thing I said its average weight was 15,000.
Yeah. The third edition was very explicit that it's a 50,000 pound creature with much larger specimens not being rare.
Third edition is where they really ramped up the difficulty on it too, right? Where they made it less of a kind of my first dungeon monster.
Well, it's funny. It's never really gone above challenge rating 3.
Yeah.
Third edition had a CR3. Second edition, I think, drops that to 2. Or fifth edition drops that to 2. I think maybe first edition is its most, deadly, just because first edition's deadly. But in the original days, all the way up to fifth edition, they got rid of this in fifth edition, you would get paralyzed. There was a pretty good chance of getting paralyzed. And if you got paralyzed, you were paralyzed for 5 to 20 rounds. And then, you couldn't do anything. And that's when it slid over you and just started digesting you, at which point you were engulfed, you were suffocating, you were restrained, all this stuff. So in the old days, encountering a gelatinous cube was like instant death.
Yeah, especially if you have to roll like a DC 15 just to see it.
Yeah.
I like that the paralysis also anesthetized. So like you wouldn't feel the acid eating you.
So you could literally be asleep and just...
That was nice of it.
So that sort of begs the question a little bit that I had here in my notes about how solid this thing is. Like, I get that, like, if you touch it, its little pseudopods now are going to pull you into itself. But assuming that its pseudopods didn't react, just for the sake of the conversation, like, how... Is this like walking into Jello? Is like walking into water? Like, how thick is this thing?
They say if you can enter a creature unaware will just enter its space, and you'll just literally walk into it. So it has to be somewhat gelatinous, like a fluidy gelatinous substance that just sort of allows you in.
Yeah, otherwise you feel like you just tap up against it and push back out.
Yeah, exactly. It's a gelatinous cube. Yeah.
But Jello's gelatinous, and I couldn't walk through fucking Jello.
If you had a 10-foot thing of Jello, you probably could.
Jello.
But you'd still feel resistance. I think that's what Ben's trying to get at.
I know. Have you ever turned a corner? Sorry to interrupt. Have you ever turned a corner and like slammed your head into a pole? I haven't, but I've seen it happen.
I've turned a corner and walked into Jello, and I bounced right the fuck back up again.
People move really fast when they're not paying attention. Like the amount of force you put into just your everyday step is actually more than you might think. Like you can break something if you hit something solid.
Even just walking through water, there's resistance. So like it's not like air. It doesn't have the consistency of air. So there's still going to be some semblance of resistance. But if you're going fast enough, you're just suddenly like, whoa, oh God, what the hell?
I feel like
we're not saying you're going to walk through it.
This monster. I feel like
it is an ooze. So, I mean, even if it does have the resistance of, say, a Jello, it's one of those things where, like, you turn the corner and you slam your hand into it and you're like, oh, crap, it's not coming. Oh, no. Then you're getting sucked in.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not saying you walk into it and all of a sudden you're 10 feet through it. Like, you step into it and you're stuck within it, but you may only be a foot in or half a foot in, you know?
I'm really waiting for the story of who's walked in the Jello. That's kind of where I got.
Have you not actually had like an experience where you jump into a pool of Jello?
No, who's had this experience?
Yes.
Wait, are we full
obviously like
I
full
did,
of shit,
actually.
but Morgan is straight up talking
I
about.
actually did, but it was like in elementary school. We like it was a function thing, and they came up like the kiddie pool was like full of Jello, so everyone got to jump in it. It was
because
fun.
I thought this was relegated to movies like, you know, blank check style movies where it was like 90s kids movies where it's like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to jump into a thing of Jello? This happened.
No, it actually happened. Yeah.
They talk a little bit about this in the ecology, though, about like why this isn't like Jello, because the gelatinous cube is made up of a number of like inner membranes. Basically, when you get inside of it, for instance, it has these sacs of digestive like stomachs or fluids that it rearranges to actually bring next to you, and that's how you start.
Shut up. So there's anatomy it's not just blob.
Yeah, it's a giant cell.
It's a giant cell, and so
but
think of an amoeba.
Equally clear,
and it's all equally clear. Yes, although the sacs. It could maybe be displayed as like sort of floating bubbles.
Okay, why? All right, time out. Why would anyone come up with that level of it? Why not just say, yeah, it's fucking ooze and the ooze dissolves you? Why are we coming up with fucking bullshit invisible anatomy?
Because that's the ecology of
it's an amoeba, Ben. Just think of basic amoebas just on an insanely huge scale. Like this is an amoeba that is going to eat you.
That's see-through.
No, I do love Ben's question though, because Ben's question does get to the heart of what the ecology articles were, where it was literally Gary Gygax he just magicked this stuff out. He was like, it's an ooze, it eats things, like it's a mimic, it's a treasure chest, it looks like whatever. And then the ecology articles were like, it's a cool thing because it was a sign of Gary's world and his vision and Dave Arneson's vision growing beyond them to the point where fans actually wanted to think of this world as having like its own rules and physics and all this stuff. And that's where the ecology articles have been so awesome. And of the people who wrote for ecology, Ed Greenwood is probably one of the most famous, creator of the Forgotten Realms, of course, but also famous for taking this to the next level. Like he was the one, I think he wrote the Mimic article.
He wrote the Gelatinous Cube article.
And he wrote the Gelatinous Cube article. And his Mimic article, Ben, I don't know if you've listened to that episode, but it goes into details about how the pigmentation is created within cells in their body, like how cells hold pigments. Like this is the level that Ed Greenwood gets into.
But I get that, which is amazing. I agree. And I guess I get that. Assuming that we're not just going to say like a mimic is magic and magic makes it work. Like I get that. But I guess what I'm saying is the cube already worked by just saying it's a fucking intelligent blob.
It's not intelligent.
It's not intelligent.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Nerds. Give me a goddamn minute here. But what I'm saying is I feel like they're like, I can understand saying, look, assuming we're not just going to magically wave your hands away, I want to understand why the mimic is sometimes brown, sometimes green, sometimes whatever. Like, I get that. Who needed the explanation for like, it's a ooze that fucking melts you? Like, who's crossed their arms going like, wait a minute though, does it have a stomach? No, it's a fucking ooze that melts you.
Because it doesn't always melt you. It has to actually successfully attack. So this gives you an explanation for why touching it doesn't just melt your skin. It's because once it's inside of you and you're like struggling to break free.
So touching it doesn't just melt your skin. So if I just put my hand in it, I pull back out again, I'm fine.
Mechanically, like in terms of dungeon master play, yes, touching the ooze
They said they got rid of the acid.
The acid, no, the acid's still there. The paralyzing is not there.
Paralyzing.
But the reason this acid is functioning the way it does, see, what they were trying to explain more was the answer to the Jello question. See, it's the Jello Conspiracy. This is the answer to the Jello Conspiracy, which is like, why does this thing not just like, why when you walk forward, can you actually walk into it? Why does it not just push you back? How does it suck you in? How does this thing not, if it's just a vat of acid, how does it not burn through everything? And this answers those questions.
That last question I sort of get.
Yeah, it's like,
although wait a minute, no. Now I'm back to being pissed off again. Didn't we just say, like, I felt like the whole point of the cube was like it works its way through the fucking dungeon halls and it cleans everything, so it's like spick and span when you're done. When it's done, right. So well, that's not true though. If it's using its if the idea was it has to move its little stomach around, then that doesn't even make any sense unless everything dissolves everything, in which case you need to answer
it talks about this a little bit in the article too. So what a cube does is it will move incredibly slowly down the hall, picking out everything, but it only wants meat. It doesn't care about,
anything organic. It picks out. Yeah, or wood, like anything that's not basically metal
or stone. It's metal or stone.
Yeah, it's breaking down.
And it basically inorganic material it doesn't care about. But if it was just a giant thing of acid, it wouldn't have, everything would burn. Metal would burn, treasure would burn, walls would burn.
So the only reason that the swords aren't getting dissolved is not because it couldn't dissolve it. It's because it's not wanting to eat it.
It doesn't want to eat it. And it's literally
so it could melt your sword if it wanted.
But it will never want to because they're not intelligent enough to recognize that it could do some serious problems.
I feel like the easier answer was it's made of a fucking thing that dissolves organic material, but not inorganic. But okay.
No, because it's picking these things up. Like, let's say it stumbles on some moss. It's not melting the moss against the wall of the dungeon. It's sucking that moss into itself, and then there it can dissolve in whenever it feels like it. It's floating around in its body until it dissolves by its little acid vacuole.
All right, I'm gonna table this. I'm not happy with your answer, but I feel like that's more.
These are just the facts, Ben. This is
zoology.
Yeah. I feel like this is my problem. This is my burden.
What's to say this is actually an animal or a monster or a beast and not a plant?
Okay, well, you just stumped us. I mean, this is the philosophical question. Like, I'm done with the bestiary.
Why is it in the bestiary if it's actually a mutant, like a living kind of single cell fly trap, essentially?
Well, there are a ton of plant monsters that exist. So
yeah, but they're all like
plants generally are rooted and do not move on their own. Plants contain chlorophyll and can make their own food. This doesn't make its own food. Plants give off oxygen and take in carbon dioxide. Plant cells have cell walls, so maybe there's a cellular difference. I don't know. You're asking us to break down the biology here.
No, it was just a thought that I had because it is essentially just a thing that's looking for food, and there are plants that kind of do that kind of move, that don't just, stay in one place, again, that are carnivorous. And so I just thought I'd throw that at you.
It's a good question. To actually answer it, and now I really want to, but I don't have the knowledge tonight ready. But we would have to actually go back to its origins, which is it came from, pretty much all oozes did. So oozes they're extraplanar. They came from the demon lord.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They were all sheddings of the demon lord Jubilex.
Is that confirmed or is that a believed
No, that's
theory?
Confirmed in 5th edition. Yeah.
And there's
So oozes is just like smegma from a demon?
It's demon smegma. Yeah.
Gross.
Which demon smegma was the name of my high school punk band, by the way. But you can get our album Gelatinous Cube on Amazon.
Gelatinous Cubes.
So we have Jubilex as the origins of these creatures, and I don't know. I'd have to find out exactly what Jubilex was made out of to understand their true classification. But I would say not plant. I would say if anything, it's the extraplanar snot of a demon lord and this is proven in 5th.
That somehow lives on its own.
Well, he is a demon lord.
This is another thing that 5th has confirmed. Long held rumors confirmed by 5th edition.
Big thing in 5th edition to not really create too much new lore, but to confirm old lore. It's pretty much what Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and Xanathar's Guide and Volo's Guide. They all take like all these disparate pieces of lore and they just like lock in a canon for it.
So this applies to all Ooze?
Yeah, all Ooze. All Ooze is the castings off of Jubilix. That's pretty stated in the 5th edition Monster Manual, and it's kind of confirmed in Out of the Abyss.
So that would mean that, assuming that happened in one particular spot or spots, I guess, you don't have variations, like dramatic variations, I guess, but in different continents between the Oozes because they're all coming from the same place.
You don't have a lot of, that's actually a really key thing to point out there, Ben. I mean, you don't see like in a lot of adventures when they go to exotic locales, they'll sort of mix it up. You know, they'll have like an exotic version of the Displacer Beast or an exotic version of, you know, the goblins. They do this in Tomb of Annihilation, one of the more recent adventures where they have these forest goblins who act very differently from your normal, you know, mainland goblins. I said forest goblins, but they're really more like jungle island goblins. They like stack on top of each other and they have totem masks. But with oozes, it's rolled around. They're the same. And even on different planes of existence, they're the same. And I think that speaks again to the fact that they came themselves from an extraplanar origin. They came from the abyss.
So, all right. So talk to me then about the intelligence. Are we talking 0 intelligence? Like what?
1.
So what does that mean?
They're not intelligent. They act purely on instinct. Like they have enough instinct not to go over a cliff and to sense where cold and heat is, so they know what's good and bad around them. But they're not smart enough to actually make any sort of active decision. They
are slightly smarter than flat earthers.
Okay.
There's nothing dumber than this. They are purely unintelligent. So wait a minute.
So nothing dumber than this in an animal kingdom? Because presumably, like a shrubbery is less than 1.
I mean, have you ever seen shrubbery? Like shrubbery. I mean, when I walk past shrubbery, I always feel like I'm being followed. Like the eyes in the bushes, and you never know what's going to pop out of it.
Yeah, I feel like when you talk to shrubbery and it responds. Whereas if you talk to a gelatinous cube, it just continues trying to eat you. There's no real response.
No, yes, you're right. There are creatures. They're not creatures, but if you can have an intelligence of nothing, you can in Dungeons and Dragons. But at that point, you're not a fightable monster.
Right. Okay. So is that to say that you couldn't? Are gelatinous cubes trainable?
No,
they respond to stimulus, so you can guide them. Like I was saying earlier with the hot and the cold,
but they wouldn't remember a pattern.
No.
They wouldn't know that up ahead is cold, and I remember that from last time I went up ahead.
Yeah, I like it. So they just keep going to the same spot, being like, "Whoa, no, don't like that." Oh, no,
right.
You could
stuck on a loop.
Create a pattern for them to follow of like vibrations and heat sources. Basically, like lead them around, make them think that there's food. But that's the closest to training you would get.
Now I do have to. Go ahead. You might be about to call it. You might be about to call what I was.
I was going to mention the one sentient gelatinous cube.
That's it. Go for it.
From.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, do you have everything all up? Because I need to do a bit of a look at.
Yes, I'm actually staring at his page in the actual.
It's a he. There's a gender.
It's a sex gelatin. Yeah.
Oh, God.
It's a sex gelatin. I'm really.
And since you can't see anything, he can be like, "I am super well endowed." There's not anything you could do to disprove that.
I feel like sex gelatin is something you buy at Shebop. Like it's just sex gelatin.
Nice plug for Shebop.
Yeah, there we go. Shebop, please sponsor us. So we've got his or its name is Glabagool.
Shut up.
Page 35 of the Out of the Abyss is where it is. And again, this is part of where the connection to the demon lord Jubilex.
Is this the same book that talks about the giant space hamster? Because this is also kind of out there.
That's Spelljammer. Book. That's Spelljammer. This is Out of the Abyss. I'll hold it up. This is an actual campaign for 5th edition. Very fun one involving getting kidnapped by the Drow, and then it just gets worse from there. But basically, the demon lord Jubilex is able to endow oozes with intelligence. And he endows Glabagool with some intelligence. And the cool thing about Glabagool is he's not evil. He's not like aligned against the party. So he'll join your party, and then you can have him travel around with you as a monster NPC.
Oh my gosh, that would be so ridiculously awesome.
Yeah, it's a super cool idea.
How much damage can they take? What is the HP of these things, and how would you hurt them anyway?
84 hit points in the more modern edition. Very easy to hit, though. Ben, you used to run these things as a DM. I kind of want to hear. This was the early days, right? This was like 1st edition, 2nd edition.
Yeah.
I kind of want to know, like, did your players have trouble with them? Like, was it a player killer?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was usually a way for me to like get some good fear going for a while. I don't know how much it was actually a killer. And if I recall correctly, like blunt weapons could be a little bit effective. But I recall fire working, but you're making it sound that their attracted heat maybe fire is not effective against them. I recall back in the day, maybe fire. Cold definitely did.
I think fire was just you misplaying it. You were playing the game wrong. That was...
Maybe that's very possible. Magic weapons could hurt them, I suppose. But they weren't really player killers unless I was setting it up there. Usually it was set up because I do actually remember one now. And this might not have been my idea. It's possible it was in one of the actually set up in one of the games. So you might have played the same one where I set up a cool treasure at the bottom of a ditch, or like a big hole, like a big pit, with like a cool ring, whatever in there. But it was actually at the bottom. It was filled with a gelatinous cube, so you would jump in to get whatever was down there. But of course, you're just
I love that. That's a really good idea. That's a really fun idea.
Look at this really cool, awesome, ages-old treasure worth tons and tons of money. Oops.
Yeah, and I think the player thought they were being smart, so they did levitate or something and levitated. But either way, you're going straight into it.
And if you were in Morgan's history, you could just go to a school and fill a pool and call it Jello, but it's really gelatinous cubes, and just have all the children jump into it. Right. Supervillain plots 101.
Yep.
Well, the kind of the reason I was asking that is because I feel like older D&D has this thing with puzzle monsters, right? Where it's sort of like monsters have a weakness. And if you can discover that weakness, they're pretty easy to deal with. But until you kind of lure that out, you don't really, you're bashing at it with swords and magic and just trying to whittle away its life. And so, the old gelatinous cube weakness was ice. It was like, or cold. If you could hit it with cold, it slowed it down. It lost its paralyzing touch, I think.
Could you shatter it potentially?
I mean, if I was your GM, yes, that's amazing. But it's not in the rules. Like you would slow it. Modern D&D, D&D 5 took all that out. So cold doesn't have any special effect on it.
Okay.
But it does have a really, really, really low armor class. Armor class 6. I mean, you're hitting this thing. Like there's really no way to miss it.
Yeah. Fills up the whole space.
As long as you can do enough damage to it before you go, essentially. If you walked into it enough to leave an arm outside.
I mean, yeah, they even kind of give you this weird, like modern D&D, it says, even if you're engulfed, you can sort of just choose to leave it, like by beating a very low strength check. Like you just walk in and you're like, oh, this sucks. And then you sort of turn around.
Why would you stay in a gelatinous cube?
And you're like, man.
This is uncomfortable. but I'm gonna stand right here.
Well, wait, the intelligent one, though, you could straight up go inside, sit in the middle of it like a weird invisible throne, have its little stomach stuff away from you, and straight up ride in the center of a gelatinous cube,
which,
according to its anatomy,
is kind of amazing. I mean, I don't know if it'd be able to resist the temptation, the just primal instinct to eat you, but I love that. I love that idea that someone's just like, I'm going in you, and then every once in a while they take some acid damage because it forgot.
Right.
But this brings me to a problem with the modern gelatinous cube, which is it. 5th edition did simplify it. It made it a lot easier to kill, a lot easier to fight. But when you remove its ability to sort of anesthetize you and put you to sleep, it really does beg the question, like, how does this thing ever eat anything? Because nothing is going to stay inside this. I mean, yes, it requires a strength check to get out, but it's a strength check of 12. A goblin could beat that. Yeah. And why? So how this thing eats in modern D&D, I don't know.
Well, how much does it need to eat?
I mean, it's 50,000 pounds. I think it's a lot.
I mean, how much is in a damn dungeon? I just feel like it would run out of food pretty fast.
I mean, I have to imagine that adventurers make a pretty hearty meal.
The thing's immortal. Let me see where it was. It said, I think it was the Dragon Magazine article. They said effectively the creature grows. It's an immortal organism because unless it's destroyed by adventurers, disease, I guess, or starvation, it never dies. So it probably doesn't have to eat very much and lives for an incredibly long time.
I was going to ask what the oldest of record was, but I guess this sort of answers that question. Okay, so we're experimenting now. We've got it in our lab.
Yeah, let's pull it in.
So I split it directly in half, 5 feet on all sides. What happens?
The part of it that's split, I would say becomes an intelligent, or not intelligent, but another.
Bud, don't they?
They bud or they split. If they grow large enough, they just make 2 cubes. So.
Grow large enough indicates that they're not always 10 by 10 or whatever. So there's varying sized cubes wandering around down there.
In theory, yeah.
It depends on what you were doing. Like, Ben, if you just put it under if you just somehow strap this down with anti-ooze straps and then just cut it down the middle, basically one of the pieces would just be sitting there and the ooze would reattach as soon as it could. Yeah. Like if you didn't immediately pull them apart and lock them in different, test tubes, the two halves.
But if
you did, because it didn't make the choice to do it intentionally, I would say that it doesn't bud. What do you guys think?
I think
it's non-sentient. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't make a choice, period. So
it just
I think
happens.
If you split a gelatinous cube in half, it becomes 2 gelatinous cubes.
I think you might just end up with two dead gelatinous cubes. The something to keep in mind, Ben, when you're talking about the split, when it splits at normal size, according to again, this is the main dragon article, where most of the ecology is actually delved into. They split at normal size, and then the things they split into are just slightly smaller than normal size. So there is some sort of internal inflation where because they say they're 8 by 8 by 8.
Thing.
Yeah, they say they're 8 by 8 by 8 when they're born through that sort of mitosis split, and then they take a few months to grow to full size because they really do. They give some places give them a bit of range, but at least in this article, they really kind of fix them at that. 10 by 10 with very slight variation. There aren't, even though it'd be great to have little puppy sized gelatinous cubes. That's like pure homebrew. I didn't see anywhere in the actual canon where that's discussed.
So if I were to cut off a piece of it, if I were to cut a little square of it and just take it home with me,
I think it would just be dead cube flesh.
That makes sense. So I do have a question from chat. Is there any creature that can eat the gelatinous cubes?
Yes, actually. I don't know that they would necessarily want to, but any creature with acid resistance or immunity would be able to eat an ooze.
What creatures have acid resistance, like a dragon or something?
Yeah,
that would be so sick.
Black and copper dragons. You wouldn't want to eat it whole for obvious reasons, because shit.
Also, that's 50,000 pounds of food.
If you're big enough.
No, but I mean, if you eat this thing without killing it, it's just gonna in your stomach start digesting you from
and
the
digest
inside
the
out.
things that you eat.
Yeah,
So
like a tapeworm, like a giant tapeworm.
A cube-shaped tapeworm.
But I don't think there is any creature. They naturally don't have. They naturally don't have any predators like that kind of. I mean, adventurers are there, and maybe some of Tyler's characters will eat oozes.
That image you just threw up is pretty awesome. It's a giant cube balancing somehow on a guy's head. It's the guy's head is just eaten down his skull, but the rest of the body is still intact.
That raises another question, because if for that to have happened, that would have been like a near instantaneous, like all the flesh is being eaten. How quick does it digest you?
Well, no. I mean, if this guy wandered in,
well, no. I mean, he's literally dropping the sword right now.
I didn't see that.
Yeah. So this guy just had a gelatinous cube fall on his head. So no, but it does beg to ask the question, like, how quickly does it digest something?
3d6. They did about 10 acid damage every time it gives, between 10 and 21, right?
Yeah, it's 21 acid damage if you're inside of it. So for a low level, up to about 4th or 5th level, you could die in a couple rounds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty quick kill.
That's like 12 seconds.
Level 1, you're dead in 1 round. Like that's, yeah.
Well, so you've said that 2 of them will combine into 1.
Not permanently.
It's a temporary.
They'll just hang out together for like 2 to 8 days and then split apart. Or if they bump into a third one, it's like the little ball on string thing people used to have in their offices. It just shoves the other one off.
Oh, interesting.
Ben, I have go ahead, finish. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just have a question for you as I'm thinking about like all this merging and splitting and sort of the body horror we're seeing up here on the screen. You're a big fan of horror. I know that. Like you love old horror movies, new horror movies, B horror, all of it. And like, where does the gelatinous cube, like, I do find it to be a scary monster, but a lot of players kind of think, it's so slow. It just kind of comes, they're thinking of it in terms of numbers. What to you, like, do you find it to be a scary monster, and why?
Yeah, well, not as much now. Weirdly, this one took the opposite approach from the owlbear, I feel like. But what was scary about it in the day was that idea that like you just go to sleep and then you'd wake up, with half your body dissolved because it was anesthetizing you, and you weren't feeling it, and you're paralyzed. So that seemed pretty terrifying. The idea of just a cube that's pretty slow, that doesn't really have any other abilities to it other than eating you. That's cool. Don't get me wrong. It's still pretty dope, but it doesn't. It's less frightening to me. Also, the idea that like you could, is it the gray ooze that as you split it apart, it keeps on coming, but it's different oozes?
I think that's the black ooze that splits.
Maybe it's black. Okay. I don't know. That concept is pretty scary too. But yeah, so if the idea is I can cut it all up and it's just pieces falling off of it, but it's not. I don't know. It seems less scary like that to me. The idea of it killing you in your sleep seems.
Now, what about
terrifying.
something like the way you used it, where like you go down into a well to get something, or like one of the first time I ever read about a gelatinous cube was in one of the dungeon master's books, and it had a player's guide, and it had a description of like, they used to do those like in-game moment, like little examples, sidebars. And this one was like, the players, one of the players opens this door and he ends up in this hallway, and like he hears this shuffling sound. He doesn't know what it is. And then he sees the cube coming down the hallway towards him, and he turns around and the door is magically sealed itself. And he's in a dead end hall with a gelatinous cube, like coming, like.
Yeah. See, there's what. Yeah, you're. That's right. You can definitely set up to be pretty damn terrifying if you just do it the right way. Like that's a great way to do it.
And so, is it just like the slow creep of like death? I mean, is that what this thing kind of represents? Like just the slow, inevitable.
Yeah, I like the idea of the monsters that didn't give a shit about your gear, right? Like the goblins, all the other monsters. You have the cooler special swords, arrows, whatever. Like, but like the ones like the gelatinous cubes or the rock grubs. I don't know if they still have rock grubs.
They do still have rock grubs, yeah.
It's like those, I don't give a fuck if you have a +10 battle axe. They're just, you're looking the other way and then suddenly they're eating through you. And it, like you were sort of describing it as like a puzzle monster. And to me, and you're right, like the idea of everything's got its weakness probably comes from pulpy comic books or something like that. So I kind of get that concept. But to me, the idea of the puzzle monster isn't so much of like figuring out what its one weakness is. It's the monster that like you don't beat by having the biggest sword or axe. You got to figure out the monster itself is the puzzler, like the mimic is the whatever. And so to me, the gelatinous cube is like that. Like it's not like, yeah, if you just surround it with a bunch of maces, you'd kill it pretty easy. But presumably it's being given to you in a context where your weapons, or a rust monster is another good example, where like suddenly you're having to figure out another way to get around this thing because what you're used to using is not effective anymore.
Yeah.
I imagine it could be used for railroading as well. Like if you don't want people to go down a certain pass, or you want to guide people in a dungeon, just throw a bunch of gelatinous cubes in their way and they're kind of running the other direction.
Yeah, I do like this idea. You're back to your thought about two cubes like merging. I love this thought of like you maybe fall down into a hallway and by from both sides of the hallways are two like, gelatinous cubes, like very slow trains, just kind of coming at you, about to crush you between them. I think like you can make some really interesting scenarios where you fight gelatinous cubes, and that's how you have to use them. You can't use them like just and there's a gelatinous cube, like go fight it,
Right.
It's a 10 by 10 cube sitting on the ground in the overland.
Speaking of finding in the overland, as far as its natural habitat, all I was able to find were crypts and dungeons and tombs and these sorts of things, but I wasn't able to find a clear, definitive answer as to why this is where the only places that they were. Like, why don't they leave the dungeon? Did you guys happen to find anything?
A lot more to eat in a forest.
Well, you think
they can't like climb things or anything like that. So once they're in a dungeon, they can't really get out because they can't go upstairs.
They can't go upstairs. What?
Well, they can though, right? I mean,
yeah, I think they can.
I think they can
go upstairs.
They can squeeze themselves into like a foot by foot cube,
exactly,
and like force themselves through like little cracks in the walls and stuff like that, then there's no reason why they couldn't actually exist outside of dungeons or find their way back out.
I heard someone give an explanation about them not liking sunlight, but if I didn't find that as anything official, that was just some random person online talking.
I was just wondering, and came on, that was pretty close to the question I was going to have, which is you see them in dungeons. Okay, fine, I get that. That's cool. But unless they're like seated, and they're seated by DMs. I get that. But in terms of what we're just making up the ecology, how are they getting from dungeon to dungeon? Like they must be traveling over the ground somewhere to get into these dungeons. So where they, yeah. So somewhere they're above ground getting to these dungeons, presumably, or I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how else they get there.
Seeping through the soil itself.
I always kind of figured there's a conspiracy of evil wizards who hire out their services to lure gelatinous cubes into dungeons to trap wandering adventurers. Like you want a housekeeper / security dog. We will get you a gelatinous cube. It's the Jello Conspiracy.
Yeah,
John was right.
Developing this mental image of this world that is just essentially nothing but dungeons underground. Like there's just nothing but dungeons everywhere.
Well, Forgotten Realms does talk about how dungeons are all connected that way. Like,
oh, interesting. So all dungeons have some sort of, because everything's connected to the Underdark and the Drow and all this sort of stuff effectively. It's a very Diablo world. Is that what you're saying, John?
God, you're a bunch of nerds. So you're telling me right now that in your canon, all the dungeons are literally one system. So I could be an Underdark, and if I go far enough, I'm in the Temple of Elemental Evil.
You basically, it actually pretty much, yes. Like,
so I could just run.
I mean,
if
not,
powerful
no,
enough.
but
they're not connected by hallways, but there's gonna be like little cracks and things in between.
So, but I love this. So the gelatinous cube in whatever dungeon I'm in may have come from some other super famous dungeon. But he was like, "There's too many fucking other."
Yeah, he used to live in the Tomb of Horrors, but like, after after he fell into the fire pit, like for the 19th time, he was done.
Yeah.
No, you have to understand about the dungeons in Forgotten Realms. Like, first of all,
no, I don't.
First of all, no, I guess we're done. No, the Underdark itself, like the way the Underdark was sort of emerged was this idea that there were these rumors that like underneath all of the land was this vast subterranean world that literally spread the length of all of the whole Forgotten Realms. And people kind of like poo-pooed it. We're like, no, that couldn't happen. Then they started releasing your first Drow adventures, and they were specifically built to play on that fear that like literally underneath the overland with all of its political intrigue and all that, all of its problems was this mighty force of dark elves and demons and oozes and Jorgar and all these awful creatures that were just one little, stairway away from invading anywhere on above ground. And then to add to that is this idea that spread throughout the Underdark is all these portals and rifts in time, or rift in space and time, and like from those rifts and those portals, you have access to pretty much everything. So, and I also read, I read while we were talking about that stuff, it just specifically says in Out of the Abyss that Glabagool,
Stop saying that. Just don't say that.
that he doesn't want to come out, and he'll follow you outside. But if you force him, but he will pretty much always be seeking to go back under because of the sunlight.
There you go. That's the weakness. They don't like the sun.
Sunlight. They don't like it.
Okay, that's cool. So it is declared officially that sunlight is a
it doesn't hurt weakness. Them, but they find
like
it very uncomfortable, and they naturally shy away from it.
Cool.
Well, that explains it. There's your explanation. Yep.
So would like a radiance spell,
No, I mean it would hurt it, but it won't do like extra damage.
It won't. Will they avoid it though?
Would it drive it away?
Yeah, keep it at bay.
I think no, because it will follow you outside. It's the prolonged exposure to the sunlight that it finds uncomfortable, and I think it's not.
It would help
itself.
Dry it up. It would.
I think some DMs might allow it.
I think Kayvon would argue it, but I don't know that it would actually. Well, don't they say something in the ecology about that actually?
I think they say something about their wisdom. They're smart enough not to fall off a cliff or whatever, but they're not intelligent. I think when they're describing their wisdom versus intelligence, they break down what they will and won't do because of their instinct. But I would think that if they have and this isn't just me thinking, but if they do have a natural avoidance of sunlight, that if they were to sense that this area has sunlight in it, they would not go into the room,
Yeah, so if you could burrow a hole up to the.
Well, if you have, aren't there magical sunlights? I'm assuming that one of these magical spells is comparable to actual sunlight.
There's radiant damage. It is different to create the power of the sun. It's got different things.
Isn't there sunbeam where you straight up here is a ray of sunlight?
I think it's just fancifully named.
Okay.
It's just a wizard. Okay. Just a wizard going, it's actually lunar energy.
If there's a little DM out there who wants to allow it, I say it's fair.
Or a big DM. Big DM's fine too. We don't discriminate against sizes.
What else you got, Ben?
I think I've worked through every question on here. Oh, I did have one left. I do have one final question for you, at least that I've got here. Is there any? You sort of hinted at it before when you were talking about how they all are essentially the scrapings from the eyes, nose, and mouth of demons, which was definitely not the answer I was expecting, but fuck it, it's canon now. Is there a relationship between the gelatinous cube and other oozes? Is there any sort of symbiotic, or do the oozes stay kind of apart, or do they tend to, is there any connection between this one and any other oozes?
I mean, in the sense that they're all oozes, I couldn't find any.
No, go fuck yourself. I mean, like, in the game itself, is it like, well, in other words, like, will like a gray ooze live on top of a gelatinous cube and like somehow have some sort of symbiotic relationship as a like, comparable oozes, or is that really nothing that ever happens?
I didn't find anything personally that link the oozes beyond what John and these guys are describing as sort of their biological connection.
So any other monsters then that typically tend to use it the way we talked about before, like owlbears were sometimes used as pets by like ogres or whatever, like is there, or dragons or wood elves I remember for sure, but was there anything like that? Are the gelatinous cubes a favorite of any particular type of beast?
Well, I think Amy Chibi on the chat actually points out a good one. She says, I can see a demon using an ooze to keep some treasure safe, just grabs an item that cannot be damaged by the ooze and puts it inside the ooze as like a living safe. Which
now, is this person saying that they can see that because they're closing their eyes and they're just weirdo having visions, or
yeah, experiment, guys.
We can't hear them, but they're screaming right now. Yes, I think that's accurate though. I mean, oozes are kept in dungeons by liches, by dungeon masters, not metaphorically. I mean, people who literally control the dungeon. The drow have been known to sort of using the methods described earlier in the podcast.
Sunlight, using bright light underground, the way Kayvon was describing.
Well, no, they don't like that at all. They shy away from sunlight. They're drow. Come on, Ben.
All right.
They use cold and other influencers to have them patrol their hallways. I mean, things that keep dungeons will keep oozes to protect those dungeons. But I think it's a somewhat. I'd think it's a dangerous keeper. I mean,
if you ever want to travel down that dungeon, that would be a bit risky. But if you are, hey, this is my tomb and I don't want people to raid my shit, I'm going to fill it with 42 cubes.
I do have then one like a true final question for me, and this is for all of you to answer collectively or individually how you see fit. Can you, after all of this, and I'm now looking at this picture of this fucking Jello cube sitting here in the thing.
No, the Jello Conspiracy. Come on, it's not.
Can any of you? Is there can you think of a more ridiculous concept for a monster that's not just one like that because a one-off? I mean, like as a mainstay monster that we're seeing all the time. Can you think of one that's just more patently absurd than for some reason it's just a 10-foot by 10-foot cube that for no reason decides to stay a cube and wanders the fucking hallways and dissolves you?
I agree that it's super ridiculous, and I think the only reason that it's still in the form that it is, specifically the cube, is because of nostalgia, because it really shouldn't be the shape at all. There's zero reason for it to stay that way.
Agreed. I'm into it. I'm not complaining. I'm just wondering if any of you can think of a monster more insanely ludicrous it's a whole concept ludicrous than this.
The flump from last episode.
Stalker says flump. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we all think the flump. No, I mean, but I see what you're saying. It's like this thing. At least the flump is a weird creature that has weird explanations for why it does the things it does. This thing is like, okay, it's toothpaste. It's toothpaste being squeezed down a dungeon tube.
But hungry toothpaste. Yep.
You got to respect the sacred geometry, Ben. That's really the issue.
Right.
Gelatinous geometry.
What I love about it is that like this only makes sense in a game, like in a world that was built to be a game.
Yeah.
Right.
So many of the things that I read today looking doing my research on it, so many people were using the phrase, when you encounter a gelatinous cube, it's a rite of passage. You know, like, this is Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
It's full of Jello cubes that will eat you.
Yeah, you haven't really played Dungeons and Dragons until you've encountered a gelatinous cube.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I
what makes it scary for me, because I was scared as a kid of a lot of things, but I was scared as a kid.
So things Jonathan has been scared of on the Bestiary. Spiders, gelatinous cubes.
I think I mentioned the random encounters from Final Fantasy IV. Like I was like, oh god, jump scare.
The mimics.
Mimic doors. Mimic doors.
So, but what makes these scary for me and monsters like this is that they are living traps. Like, it's a cool concept, right? It's not you just have to walk down a hallway and you step on a pedestal and the air, boiling acid pours down on you.
Sorry, how would you step on a pedestal when you're walking down the hall?
I'm just coming up with words here.
Hang on.
I mean, you never should have stepped on the pedestal. Come on.
That
you
would be
never should have
weird.
stepped on the pedestal.
You used the jump spell.
But what I mean is that, like, you're going down the dungeon, you step on the flagstone, let's say.
There you go.
And acid pours down on you and you go, oh God, it's a trap. Here, the acid is moving after you. Like, you're not activating it. It's hunting you from the moment you're in the dungeon. Slowly, sure, but like, it's a moving, living trap. Like, it's a trap that wants you dead. It's a trap that's not going to wait for you to put your hand inside it. It's going to come find you. And that freaked me out.
There's also something actually incredibly beautiful about a jelly cube. Thank you. A jelly cube that is coming towards you down a hallway filled with skeletons and swords and just like, I don't know, of all the creatures, when you imagine it personally, it's one of my favorites. I think that's the reason why I think it is beautiful. I think that's the reason why it's drawn so often. Like when I was doing a little research for this and I was just Googling images and stuff, every time I see a dungeon, there's always in the background or somewhere in there mixed in like a little jelly cube. And I think that it has a cute place. It's almost like a Santeria, not, trademarked, whatever. There's like a Hello Kitty character almost. Like I can feel like the gelatinous cube has an adorable quality to it. Speaking of which, I want to get like a little gelatinous cube toy or something, like a little toy, like a
keychain,
right. Or like a toy on the corner of your desk with like little stuff in it. Oh my god, that'd be so cute.
Literally a plastic ice cube.
Yeah,
exactly.
Done. You're done.
Done. Fill it up with jelly.
I feel like it's also a bit macabre, but also gorgeous in the same way. Like, yeah, because it's just that image of this cube full of like loot that you don't dare go for.
Or you do.
Or you do if you have backup and health potions.
Also, how have we not done gelatinous cube Jello shots at any of our parties?
Yeah. We really need to.
Why have we been?
Yeah, huge miss.
Big
miss.
Yes, you have to fill them with little stuff, and they should have treasure inside, like little toys.
It's harder to make them vegan, but it can be done.
Can you make vegan Jello?
It can be done.
Yeah, vegan gelatin. I'm sure there's some sort of non-cow.
There is. They sell like creepies.
We're gonna make these, and we're gonna put little like toys inside that you have to, you have to eat the jello to get the treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Something. Did you guys come across the alternate name? Was it like Athcoid?
Athcoid, yes, I did.
Athcoid. That was kind of cool. Like, did you know this, Ben? That their gelatinous cube is just like colloquial term to describe them. They're actually called Athcoids. So now you know.
It's glue the Athcoid. All of you go find yourself.
I do recommend to everybody, if you read any of the ecology articles, this one has personally been my favorite as far as the frame story.
Because of the ending?
Because of the frame story, because of the ending. The ending is so good. I won't spoil it.
It's very short.
Which episode or which volume was that again?
Dragon 124. We're going to link it in the description, as well as I'm going to go back and try to link the other ones in the older descriptions as well, because these are definitely worth reading.
They're not. This one is not the most informative, but it's definitely the most fun story. thus far.
It's only like 2 pages long. It's very short.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth your
reading.
time.
It's a bathroom
And
break.
I will say the ending, I actually had to do a double take. I was reading this article at a Great Clips, and I had to do a double take and actually reread the ending. I was like, I wasn't paying attention. What just
I think I laughed out loud. Like, I was just like, oh, that is the best. That is
we
perfect.
won't spoil it. We won't spoil it, but you should go read it.
All
Any
right.
other fun facts that people picked up in their research that we should probably share before we go?
Just a 1-sentence answer from everybody. Where would you least want to encounter a gelatinous cube? And we can't do showers. We've already done showers too much.
Well, I mean, in our life or in a D&D
let's say in
campaign?
in a dungeon. What was the worst situation you can think of? Just real quick.
I still agree that like the older versions where they could crawl all over you while you're asleep and take you out that way would have been the worst. So I think they're definitely less scary now, but that would have been my least favorite way to go.
Okay, so Morgan says sleeping bag.
Yep.
Tyler, what's yours?
Kind of my first encounter. Like, I went through like a dangerous pond right into a gelatinous cube, and it's like, well, the pond is dangerous. I can't go back. And in front of me, there is a cube of acid.
I gotta say, I've never heard the phrase dangerous pond. It's like the least dangerous thing ever, but I love it. Dangerous puddle.
Ponds are incredibly dangerous. You clearly have not been around enough small bodies of water in your life.
Just kiddie pools filled with Jello. Okay, Vod.
Yeah, so this is kind of on same theme as Tyler, but we didn't really talk much about them being able to move around underwater. And I think if I was in a dungeon or a cave system and I came across like an underground body of water, I was like, oh, I'll just swim through and see where this leads. And all of a sudden now I'm being like engulfed by an underwater gelatinous cube. That would be incredibly terrifying.
That's a good one. That's really
That's a
good.
great one. Yeah, I would be just so confused what the fuck was going on. Trying to see through.
Why can't I swim anymore? What's how? Why does it burn?
When you mentioned earlier wells, I was just thinking it'd be so crazy to think, oh, that's water down there in the well, and like reaching in to grab some, and it's actually a gelatinous cube that just looks like water from above.
Yeah, I actually give Ben. I give you credit. That my pick is your setup there. That's brilliant. I that may have to show up someday when everybody's forgotten about it. But that's a great thing. Now my players are going to be terrified of any well I put in the game. What's yours, Ben?
I suspended above a room full of trampolines.
Wait, what?
That's how we get. Where's that picture? Where's that picture? Now we know what happened.
The barbarian jumped a little too high.
That's what happened here. Okay, so Ben's fright of the Mega Man death spikes. All right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Ben, is there any projects you have coming up that we can pitch here for you?
When does this come out?
This will come out in a week. So
okay, so
like September.
You'll have missed me at
First-ish.
Dragon Con. So nothing I'm allowed to talk about too much. The Underfoot, my post-apocalyptic hamster story is still on shelves. And Great Divide 2 will be released in a few months, but I can't really say too much about that. So that, or otherwise catch me at a convention.
Are you going to be at Rose City?
I will be at Rose City. I'll just do some signings there, though. I don't have a table. But
Okay.
I'll be at the Oni booth for signings.
Nice. Okay. So if you're in the Portland area, Rose City Comic-Con coming up in September, 13th, 14th, 20th?
Weekend. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Weekend the 14th, maybe.
Awesome.
14th,
Rose City
15th.
Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And then for us, you might see some of us are rocking our t-shirts tonight. We've got the Bestiary. I see Kayvon's got our Alignment May Vary t-shirt on. We've got, you can buy those now on our website at alignmentmayvary.com.
Currently small sizes only, but we'll fix that.
Yeah, we're gonna. Right now, you can only get them for kids, but that'll change.
Unless
like
you are in
you guys
fact
do.
halfling size. If you're gnome, golden. But
if you're a small DM, if you're a little DM, you can you can do it.
Once again, mediums, you're out of luck.
Yeah, we don't do that. No, well, only little pixie size and extra large.
No, keep an eye on the store. We are going to have some new designs in different sizes. So that is a thing that happens now. We have a store. We're very excited about it. We are going to be launching our Alignment May Vary project September 1st, which is right around the corner.
That's Sunday, everybody.
Yeah. So for those of you listening to this podcast in the future, it has happened. Please do check us out if you haven't already.
If you don't know what that is, it's basically we have for 3 years. I've been running a game with Tyler Morgan and some other friends, and Tyler Morgan and Kayvon are all in this. And we took that game and have turned it into a voice acted, full scripted story. So it's not a live play. It's
essentially
really
a radio play that we put together based off of our adventures. We didn't really add anything to it. It's just taken out with all the stuff that happens when you do a live show. We got rid of all the fluff.
The last thing I'll say is advertisement for our next episode, which is coming up on the 18th of September. And we're going to be joined by Ari Marmel of Green Ronin Publishing. And he is an awesome writer. He's been writing for years in various RPG settings. He's written for White Wolf. He's written for Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast. He's going to be joining us to talk about the Mind Flayers.
Yeah, that should be a really interesting episode. Looking forward to it.
And specifically, I think he said kind of an interesting lead in here. I think he said he wants to talk about what he doesn't like about how Mind Flayers have been used, like in every official thing.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. So it should be a real interesting episode from an awesome writer.
All right. So with that, thank you for watching The Bestiary and our roundabout interesting discussion about Gelatinous Cubes. We have been Alignment May Vary and our guest, Ben Fisher, the amazing comic book writer. Yes. I don't want to play one of Ben's games now. I'm genuinely terrified.
It's okay. He thinks everything's weak to fire. So that's your.
Okay. There we go. Yeah. Just go with the elemental-based characters. You're fine. All right. So we'll be back. Our next episode on Mind Flayers. Check us out then. Bye, everyone.